North Yungas Road in Bolivia is one of the most picturesque and most hazardous roads in the world. Just imagine biking along a cliff trail at a mind-numbing height, overlooking the lush Bolivian jungle and misty mountains at a distance. What a view! But as soon as you realize you're riding on a 10-foot wide stretch of road, some of which isn't even paved, you might get skin crawls. And for a good reason. Over 200 folks tumble to their demise each year on this devious mountain climb. And the absence of any guardrail doesn't help at all. Now, if you're more into walking, consider the Husseini Bridge in Pakistan. It's officially the most dangerous hanging bridge in the world, but hardly the only one in the country. It's a long and nerve-wracking traverse over Lake Boret, with many planks of the bridge missing and the whole construction creaking ominously in the wind. Still, the place has become a major tourist attraction, although the old and broken bridge visible nearby only adds to the impression that you're inevitably going to fall to a screaming end. Well, at least you can be thankful that the lake beneath is not Lake Natron in Tanzania. If you fall into water, you still have a chance of survival. If you fall into the waters of Natron, not so much. The pH levels here are a skin-melting 10.5. What passes for water is more like an alkaline soup. No wonder this place is so peaceful. Pretty much nothing wants to live here. And yet, flocks of flamingos come to Lake Natron to breed every few seasons, and it becomes a white-pink paradise for the period. Positively. Which can't be said about the Danakil Depression in Ethiopia. Despite its beautiful, otherworldly landscape, it's perhaps the loneliest place on Earth. Yellow, orange, and green mounds are made of salt, sulfur, and iron, creating views like nowhere else on the planet. Yet the combination of temperature and toxic minerals makes this place absolutely unlivable. Researchers coming here haven't found even microscopic life in this valley. Really, like another planet. Beautiful and desolate. On the other hand, there's an island that's bubbling with life, yet still you don't want to be there. It's called Snake Island, and the name says it all. It's chock full of snakes. In fact, there are so many of them, especially the venomous varieties, that Brazil has forbidden access to the island to any and all visitors. But even if it wasn't closed off, not many would be brave enough to go to a place where a single step offshore could land you a venomous bite. Now, I'll bet that Fly Geyser in the middle of the Nevada desert was created partly because humans became jealous of that. This place had been just another bit of desert until 1916, people came here to drill a water well. They quickly saw the error of their ways, though. The water came out boiling hot and unfit for drinking. 50 years later, there was another attempt, but the same thing happened. We don't learn, do we? Anyway, hot water never stops spewing from under the ground, and today we have a massive geyser cluster colored in shades of red, orange, and yellow. Now I say let's take a break from things that could bite, burn, or crush you, and take a walk in a serene forest. We're in Japan, and it's Sagano Bamboo Forest, a marvelous natural park where you can't help but hush your voice and just look. And listen too. Because the sound of the wind in the bamboo trees is the first ever officially recognized soundscape. All the more surprising to find such a place just half an hour's ride from Kyoto, one of the busiest cities in the country. Take a deep breath of fresh air now. You're gonna need it. We're going underwater. Behold the Great Blue Hole, apparently named by Captain Obvious. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. Located off the coast of Belize, this giant sinkhole is a massive tourist attraction, especially popular among divers. It's actually a whole cave system, and they say it gets weirder and more picturesque the deeper you dive. Beware though, it's popular among sharks too, and both bull sharks and hammerheads have been spotted here more than once. At first glance, this pretty waterfall, located in Minnesota in the US, looks like your average waterfall. What's interesting about this waterfall is that it has two different bodies of falling water. One side has water falling into another body of water, Lake Superior. The other one has water that falls straight into a huge natural hole in the ground. Where does this water lead? Well, that's the mysterious part. No one seems to know. People visiting the waterfall have dropped sticks and other objects down the disappearing waterfall, but they never see their items reappear downstream. In the past, scientists put the water to the test by releasing dye into the waterfall. They've even dropped large amounts of ping pong balls down there. But they've never found a trace of the dye in any bodies of water in the area. So, where is this water going? Well, most of you will agree that this water has to go somewhere. Perhaps it's going into the ground. But wouldn't it have to come out somewhere? Scientists are still working on figuring this one out. If you were to travel 8 miles or so north of Salisbury in England to a place called Salisbury Plain, you'd see tourists staring in awe at the Great Stonehenge. This prehistoric stone formation has been sitting in this spot for thousands of years. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, Stonehenge was constructed in 6 stages between the years 3000 and 1520 BCE. But what's so interesting about a bunch of giant rocks? A lot, actually. Well, today we have machines that can help us lift heavy materials to build giant buildings and monuments. Back in the days when Stonehenge was built, no one had access to this type of technology. So how on earth could anyone have lifted stones weighing anywhere from 4 to 37 tons? Even more than that, why were they doing this? Archaeologists have come up with plenty of theories to explain this phenomenon. Some guess that the men who built Stonehenge used a system of sledges, rollers, and boats. Others hypothesize that it was built with a weighted levee system. Well, many of these guesses seem to make sense to a certain extent. To this day, no one has a definitive answer, and there may never be one. If you saw dancing lights in the sky, what would you think they were? Aliens coming to Earth? Shooting stars? Well, the residents of Hesselin Valley, Norway, have to live with this burning question every single night. In Hesselin Valley, brightly colored lights appear in the sky in different colors and shapes. For the last 4 decades, and possibly longer, this phenomenon has continued to puzzle scientists. According to some theories, these lights could be caused by a nearby radioactive lake emitting particles that light up in the air as they evaporate. Other scientists think that the base of the valley contains a lot of sulfuric acid. When it comes into contact with the water, it causes sparks to appear in the sky. Even though there are many different guesses as to why this town gets their very own light show every night, scientists still haven't come up with a definitive answer. For now, they'll just have to sit back and enjoy the free show. Your adventures are getting more and more extreme. You're heading for Antarctica. There, in the Southern Ocean, you'll find the Ross Sea Ice Shelf. Say that 5 times real fast. Later, not now. It's roughly the size of Spain, with the ocean underneath containing as much water as the North Sea. Once, scientists drilled all the way down through this enormous chunk of ice. Imagine their astonishment when they found life in those extreme conditions. The researchers came across dozens of mysterious species not known before. The most unnerving were upside-down swimming fish and overturned sea anemones hanging in the frigid waters. Hopefully, bizarre places with a notorious reputation don't frighten you. Well, too bad, because you're about to visit the Bermuda Triangle. It's an area between Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico where planes and ships seem to vanish in thin air. For the first time, this place attracted a lot of attention in 1945. That's when 5 U.S. Navy planes disappeared during training. Before radio contact was lost, the flight leader said, "We're entering white water. Nothing seems right." After that, the planes with 14 men flying them disappeared. Even scarier, a rescue plane with 13 people on board never came back as well. Some people believe the mythical city of Atlantis lies at the bottom of the triangle. They claim its inhabitants use extraterrestrial technologies to sink ships and crash airplanes. Others blame rare and unexplored natural phenomenon, for example magnetic anomalies. Or massive pockets of flammable methane gas. There we go again. Then, if a bolt of lightning ignited a giant methane bubble near a ship or a plane, this could probably make it sink without a trace, except the smell. But methane is found everywhere all over the world, and it never behaves this way. Some experts aren't sure there's a mystery to explain whatsoever. Lots of busy routes pass through this area. No wonder more ships and planes sink there than anywhere else. Now, prepare some warm clothes. You're heading for the north again. Your destination is Cape Desolation in Greenland. Nice place. In 2012, Canadian researchers were sampling the water in that area, and their equipment came back to the surface with pieces of coral attached to it. That's how a cold water coral reef was stumbled across. These unique pinkish corals can easily go without sunlight and live in strong currents 3,000 feet below the surface. Another unique spot you can't miss lies between Greenland and Siberia. The Kettle Ridge is the deepest and most remote portion of the global mid-ocean ridge system. In some places, it reaches the depth of more than 3 miles. It's only natural the darkest corners of this underwater world remain unexplored. Fascinating chemical reactions happening at the bottom of the ridge produce hot fluids rich in minerals. They spew, like freshmen at a rush party, from seafloor vents. And since these vents are isolated from the rest of the ocean, they're hot spots for bizarre creatures found nowhere else in the world. Your next stop is just off the coast of Cuba. Circular columns, paved floors, symmetrical stone structures. That's what the Cuban underwater city looks like. What happened there? Why was a large city abandoned at a depth of more than 2,000 feet? Lots of people believe those are the ruins of a long-forgotten civilization. But scientists have their doubts. They claim the lost city is nothing but a natural phenomenon that appeared about 5 million years ago. The disc and donut structures often appear around the areas of the seafloor where natural gases break free. Again with the gases. When you come to visit the Sargasso Sea in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, you won't find its shores. Instead, it's surrounded by powerful ocean currents. These are the same currents that turn the sea into a gigantic convention for dense brown seaweed. In the 19th century, a French ship was discovered in the Sargasso Sea. Its sails were set, but not a single crew member was on board. This mysterious disappearance made people believe the seaweed was carnivorous. The Sargasso Sea is indeed a weird place. It's always eerily calm and unnaturally warm, even though it's surrounded by the churning, freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Bermeja Island was located off the north coast of the Yucatan Peninsula in the Gulf of Mexico. About the size of San Marino, it was well known and had been on many maps since the 16th century. Over 4 centuries, countless fishermen and travelers from around the world talked of the island's distinct red coast. Bermeja means reddish-orange in Spanish. Search expeditions started not long after its disappearance, a notable one being in 2009. Some believe the island was flooded because of the melting ice caps rising to sea levels. Others think the island was destroyed deliberately. It remains a mystery to this day. But here's the strange part. Bermeja is by far not alone. Islands appear on some maps and disappear on others. Some consider these lands a bad sign for sailors. Others view them as salvation during a storm. The very first mention of an island disappearing from the face of the earth was in the year 360 BCE. The very last was recent enough to be captured on Google Maps. You've probably heard of the first one, Atlantis. Plato wrote about it, describing a rich civilization with advanced technology way ahead of his time. After him, many other famous philosophers and writers described it as a paradise on Earth. Huge buildings with striking architecture, picturesque nature, people living in peace and harmony, a real utopia. Until earthquakes and floods sank it to the depths of the sea forever. Before Plato described it for the first time, there was not a single mention of Atlantis. So, until some undeniable evidence reveals itself, it's still seen as mythical. In 1558, a descendant of the famous 14th century explorer Niccolo Zeno, published a map supposedly based on his ancestors' findings. It describes the island of Friesland to the south of Iceland. Many people searched for this unheard-of place to build a new world on it, but it eluded their discovery. For more than a century, this island appeared on different maps and almost always changed its location. Historians later found out that the descendant had lied about the island's existence. Sarah Ann Island, a small piece many explorers went looking for at the end of the 19th century. It was believed to be covered with bird droppings, a highly valuable fertilizer at that time. But in the end, no one found it. In 1937, astronomers searched for Sarah Ann because it would have made a perfect location for viewing a total solar eclipse. And again, they found nothing. It might have never existed at all, or it could have been lost to the rising sea. Now get this. At the beginning of the 20th century, a huge piece of Crocker Land appeared on maps north of Greenland. This wasn't considered just a novel island, but a whole new continent. During his journey to the North Pole, explorer Robert Peary discovered an unknown land that wasn't marked on any maps. Peary had been on the northernmost Canadian island Ellesmere when he looked through his binoculars and noticed white mountains stretching across the horizon on a distant island. Peary didn't have enough food and fuel to sail there. He had to turn around. A few years later, a new expedition was organized. It took researchers a long time and a lot of money to find the land Peary was talking about. Almost all supplies had run out, and hope was leaving the travelers. But then, they saw those same mountain peaks of an unknown island. Sadly, their joy soon turned to dismay when it turned out that this was not an island, but an illusion caused by fog, cold temperatures, and sunlight. At a certain angle, it looked like an island, but as you get closer, it changes its shape and disappears like a mirage in the desert. This island is the most isolated place in the world. It's located in the South Atlantic Ocean, 1,600 miles away from South Africa and 1,100 miles from Antarctica. A perfect location for an introvert. It's challenging to reach the island, and typically you can only do so from some large ships passing by. Almost the entire island is covered by a glacier, and in its center lies a volcanic crater. The only permanent residents of the island are penguins and seals. The island was discovered by a French explorer in 1739. However, the coordinates of this place were not recorded. For the next 69 years, the island was hidden. In the early 19th century, it was finally rediscovered. But a human foot came ashore only in 1927. Hopefully, it was still attached to some explorer. In the mid-20th century, people decided to build a weather station there. As soon as the researchers sailed to the island, they discovered something strange. They found a lifeboat in a small lagoon among the seals. It was in good condition and could still sail. The researchers found oars and an empty copper buoyancy tank not far from the boat. There were no markings or emblems on the boat. It seemed that a ship was wrecked and the sailors escaped by this boat. However, no human tracks were found on the island. Who owned this boat and what happened to those who sailed on it remains a mystery. Now, let's end our trip with an island that is completely safe and even pleasant. What a surprise! Pig Beach is an island located in the Bahamas. This is not the official name of this place, but it's called that because of the local swimming pigs. The island is inhabited by these animals. They sunbathe on the beach, walk through the jungle, and beg for food from tourists. But the cool thing is, they can all swim really well. Cute pink and brown piglets splash in the water and grunt, begging for food. Thanks to feeding by tourists and caring locals, these animals manage to survive on the island. You can stay at a hotel on a nearby island and visit the pigs by boat. Nobody knows precisely where the pigs came from. According to one legend, the pigs survived a shipwreck and swam to this island. You can find several cats and goats there as well. Animal Farm, anyone?